All right, welcome to the FIREchat Podcast. My name is Rich Rice. I'm your host, and on the show today, I have Mr. Peter Fortunato. Let's give him a round of applause. See, I don't get to do that in the studio. There's nobody to applaud.
I see.
So, Pete, I just wanted to say before we get really started here, how much we all appreciate you coming out. You're a huge mentor to all of us. I'm sure you know that. And do you ever get sick of hearing that?
A little bit.
Yeah. So, whoa, that's a little loud. My bad. You okay, Farrah? Okay. Farrah's controlling the sound back there. So let's give Farrah a round of applause. Because I literally just threw like an entire new soundboard at her, and then she didn't know what wasn't even ready for it. So we also had a ton of volunteers help us to get this event ready. So I'd like to give them a round of applause too. Thank you, everybody. All right, Pete. Man, I don't even know where to start. I met you at Mixed Lunch 5 years ago. I was barely even getting started with real estate. I don't even think I'd done a deal yet. And in walks you, and somebody someone nudges me like that's Pete Fortunato. I'm like, all right, cool. Yeah.
He's old.
I was like, he's got a cool name, So, and I asked you for a book recommendation.
Yeah.
And do you have a guess what the book was?
Building Wealth One House at a Time.
I was one of those. I think it was John Schaub's book. Was one of those.
Richest Man in Babylon. Thank you.
It was the Monopoly game was the one that caught my attention.
Yeah, Dave Glubasek.
Yeah. And I literally went home and bought that book. And what about that? And I never really got a chance to ask you, what about that book made you recommend that to somebody that was?
Well, I knew Dave years ago.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote small books and impact reports back probably in the 60s.
Yeah.
And he badgered people. And so people like me who were getting started in real estate, beginning to do some deals, and people were talking about the fact that we were making deals and talking about them. He would call and try to get you to write. And I have a really high opinion of my opinion, but I'm not much of a writer. And so he badgered me until finally he said, you got to write this. And I said, well, next year. And he just shut up. And January the following year, he called and said, it's next year. We need a book. And so I sent him an impact report, which he published, and it was tough. But his book, both of his How to Grow a Money Tree and Monopoly Game, were two very good, short, easy books from back in late 60s.
Awesome.
And they made a good impression on me, like most people who make an effort to encourage people to improve themselves.
Awesome. And that book, when I first read it, there was something in there that stood out to me. First of all, I went and actually skimmed through it a couple of days ago, or actually it was today. And I just refreshed it, and I was like, oh yeah, there's a lot more in here than I even remembered. But there was one part that always struck me is the book. When was the book written? Do you remember?
I'm going to say late 60s.
Yeah, pretty close. It was like the 70s or something like that. And it was, and there's a whole chapter where he talks about people talking about how California is going in the shitter, that it's the taxes are too high, the property values are too high, it's getting too expensive to live, and it sounded like stuff I hear today.
Yes, some things never change. Right.
So, knowing that people were saying that back in the 70s, would you buy property out here? Or?
No,
not at all. I was surprised you said that.
If I lived out here, I would.
Okay.
Would I buy an option on a house out here? Of course I would. Would I buy a remainder interest and figure people will live long and one day my grandkids will be happy to own a house? Sure, I would. But I wouldn't buy and try to manage property at this kind of distance, because every time I've sent money out of town, it's never come back.
So if you lived out here, you would absolutely buy in California.
If I lived here, I'd buy here. Yeah.
And why do you like stuff that's local so much?
Because I know what's going on around me. See, I know what's going on with the churches, with the schools, with the community centers, with the hospitals in my town. And I recognize what's happening. And that enables me to make what I believe are good decisions.
And why is that so important? And because a lot of people in this, and the reason I'm asking you is I know a lot of people are looking out of state or investing out of state. And I get that question a lot. Like, it's too expensive in California. Why shouldn't I go invest in Kansas or, Alabama or wherever? And
what you're saying when you're saying it's too expensive in California is that you're not structuring good enough deals in California.
There you have it. You're lazy. No, I'm just kidding. So how would people, I mean, I know it depends on the deal, but where
you need to put some equity on the sideline. Because if you're going to pay interest on the equity, the tenants can't afford it. And I'm a buy and hold guy. You guys have all heard me say this, but I told my grandson, I buy nice houses in nice neighborhoods that I rent to nice people who take care of the houses and pay for them for me. So that's your job. You can recognize a nice neighborhood if you live there. You can recognize a nice person by visiting people, caring about people, talking to people. You can teach them, direct them, share expectations with them, and let them enjoy a nice house that they might not be able to afford otherwise. But that's your job to make it work. And so if you've got a property that will rent for $4,000 a month, in my market, I'm going to lose half of that $4,000 to taxes, insurance, maintenance, supplies, cleaning, advertising, all those other expenses. So that means there's only $2,000 left. So I have to structure a deal with that $2,000 that the tenant can contribute in order to enjoy the house. We'll pay for the house. So all the other benefits of owning that house come to me. Now, if I need some help getting that, I can give up some of those other benefits to give me the help. But I need to structure it based on the tenant's ability to pay. And if it's $1 million and I have to say, listen, I'll give you no money down and no payments. But when I sell it, if I sell it, you'll get the first $1 million, then that's the offer I'd make. Your job is to make the deal work.
Absolutely. And how, so what I run into with a lot of these deals where I'm trying to explain what you just said to the seller about, like, I can only make the deal what the house and what the property supports. I can't just, if it's making $3,000 a month, I can't pay you $4,000 a month. There's no point, unless there's other factors. But how do you get through to people, or do you just move on to the next deal? Like, how am I just explaining it wrong? Like, how do you?
There's no such thing as an impossible deal, but there are impossible people. And so I will try to help and I will not quit. But when the people prove that they're not going to be helpful in helping them, then I move on. I say, if you ever think of something that I can help you with, don't hesitate to call me, but I can't help you with this. I've got a guy right now who's got 16 houses. Every one of them, perhaps with one exception, is in a neighborhood I really like. He wants to retire and he wants to convert to installment sale. So he wants to convert from real estate to paper. He's one of those people who woke up one day and their spouse said, "We're not going to have any more tenants, are we, honey?" What does that mean? They're not exchanging up in any more property. They're going to paper. And they're going to typically want interest-bearing paper that the capital gain that they would have lost to the government theft, which is taxation, can instead be escaped. And that equity that's not stolen by the government can provide them with interest income, which will help them to live better. Well, his properties gross $28,000 a month. And he'll make a deal, but he wants $28,000 a month net income on the mortgages. Well, what did I say about my market? How much of the gross goes away to expenses? Half. So if 28,000 is coming in, half of that's going out. That means I got 14,000 in income, and I've got to make $28,000 in payments. Will I do that? Yes, for a very short time. Why would I do that? Because I was buying a ton of equity. Why would I do that? I'm creating the equity by buying below market, or I'm buying the property on terms where they're paying the debt off very fast. Now that's going to be a tough tax consequence for me, because the income comes in and I get to deduct interest and operating expenses. I don't get to deduct the principal pay down. And if all that money is going out to principal pay down, I've got no cash flow, and I got a taxable event on the no cash flow. The no cash flow, that's hurtful. That makes it hard. But nonetheless, I have bought property with negative cash flow, but I was buying a whole lot of equity in so doing.
Mm-hmm. And how long, if you were going to do that, do you have a limit of how long you're going to feed the alligator before?
I've got a limit as to how long I think I'm going to feed it. But on occasion, I've been wrong. But I'll give you an example. In 1986, I bought a house from a lady. It's a waterfront house with a dock. It was appraised for $96,000. And I bought it for $6,000 down and $1,000 a month for 90 months with no interest. We bought that house. We rented that house. We rented it for $1,000 a month. So $1,000 a month came in and $1,000 a month went out to the seller. Mm-hmm. Everybody see that? So what happened to us? We paid taxes, insurance, maintenance, supplies, cleaning, advertising out of our pocket. So that house, day one, we had negative cash flow of $6,000. Then we spent $4,000 in negative cash flow. At the end of year one, we had $10,000 invested in that house. Down payment and negative cash flow. The next year, we had another $4,000. So now we got $14,000 in negative cash flow. But every month when we write that check, we're buying how much equity? $1,000, because we're paying down the debt. And so at the end of 8 years, we had invested a total of $27,000 in down payment and negative cash flow. And what do we have? A free and clear house. So now that next year, that house made $10,000. How did it make 10 grand? The rent came in and we didn't have any payments. So at the end of the 9th year, we had $17,000 in it. And at the end of the next year, we had $5,000 in it. And year 10, we had no money left in it because we put it in and then we recovered it. So now you can look at the net present value of the money, and maybe we're still behind a little bit because we got paid back with cheaper dollars than we put in. But nonetheless, the house had paid for itself. The tenants had paid for the house. So what did we do with that house? What do you do with a good rental house? You keep it and you enjoy what? The cash flow. So over the next 20 years, it cash flowed $250,000. So was it worth putting up $6,000 and taking on the negative? Yes, if what? You can afford it. See, I know I can afford it because I can do without food. But I had a wife and children who voted. And so I made the decision to do that, and that paid off. At the end of those years, we then sold the property to somebody who was doing a 1031 exchange. All right? Mm-hmm. And we got $250,000. What do you think the house appraised for then? More. But the appraiser wasn't buying the house. Appraised for $481,000. How did he do that? He went buy one. Yeah, $481,000. So you're going to write a check for that or what? And he said no. And so we sold it to a friend who was doing a 1031 exchange, who had to do what? Buy something he had to identify within 45 days. So I knew that he had how much money? $250,000. And how much time did he have left? 45 minutes. That's a good time to approach him. And I sold him the house for $250,000. So now I got $250,000 in cash flow. Now I got another $250,000 that we used. And now that person who bought it was a person from California. Do you know how hard it is to manage a property that's a couple thousand miles away from home? So we lease optioned that property from him. And we paid him $1,500 a month. And we sublet the house for $2,500 a month. Mm-hmm. So we still made a little bit of money. And 4 years later, we bought the property back for $250,000. Because when we leased it, we got an option to buy it back at the same price. Mm-hmm. Giving him the $1,500 a month as income, no management for that period of time, and helping him pay his avoid paying his taxes. Everybody see that? Now we got that property back. We've had $250,000 in cash flow, $250,000 in capital gain, which we exchanged. Then 4 years of $1,000 a month is another $50,000. Now we're selling it for $625,000 net dollars. What do you think we should do? No, lease option it back again. But these rascals won't do it. And they want the house, and they're taking the house away from us. But you think of that negative cash flow and how uncomfortable it was for us to pay $6,000 day one and to pay $27,000 over 8 years to free and clear a house, and look at the benefits of that one house in Florida. Not the kind of numbers you guys have. Enormous benefits. We chose to pay a negative cash flow because we saw enough reward to make it worthwhile.
So how many of you out there walked away when you saw the cash flow being negative? Did your mind open up a little bit more? Yeah. Hey, Mike, if you can click that thing over for me, just click it to Pete's, once you see his face. Keep going.
Volunteers needed.
There we go. I meant to have that one up. So if you hear something that you like and you haven't bought a ticket yet, and you think you can learn something this weekend, there you go.
Do you have the picture of the house anywhere so you can see the benefits?
I don't, not on this slide. Sorry.
All right.
Well, we'll get there. We'll do it this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So that I'm still like working my way back through that whole thing. But let's jump real quick there. A lot of people, you're probably the only, not maybe the only one, but most of us in the room are like, we're doing something else. And then we decided we wanted to go into real estate, right? We either just were miserable at our jobs or didn't know any better, or whatever. But Pete, you're one of the few that I know that like you were just all about it, like from high school, right?
Yeah, I wanted to control my life. I didn't want to ever raise my hand and ask permission after I got out of high school. I told everyone I knew that I planned to get enough assets to fund my lifestyle so I did not have to work for anybody. That went over big with the guidance counselors in high school.
I'm just curious, what did they want you to be? Or what did they?
I have no idea what they wanted me to be. But when they said, what do you plan to do? What would you like to do when you get out of high school? I said, I'd like to be unemployed. And their government schooling had not prepared them for that answer.
What's your dad think when they called him in?
My dad knew me well enough. He came in and he smiled and he understood. I mean, I watched my grandfather own his apartment building, live in the apartment building, have his barber shop downstairs. And I watched what that had done to create security for my grandfather. I'd watched my dad be an entrepreneur. And, I'd read a lot of Horatio Alger. I talked to every investor in town who was a real estate investor. When I got out of high school, I had a chance to buy a note. And I actually had almost $5,000. And now remember, this is 1968. And houses were $27,000, $30,000. And for $5,000, I could buy an $8,000 note at a discount to yield 15%. Everybody see that? And the payer on it was a school teacher. And it was a second mortgage. Or I could lend $5,000 to an investor who'd pay 8%. And he'd give a second mortgage. Which one of those did I do? The 15% one or the 8% one?
Probably 15.
The 8, because I wasn't after the extra 7%, the doubling my rate of return on $5,000. I was after a relationship with the investor. I wanted the investor sending me a check every month. I wanted to talk to him and say, it seems silly that you're sending me that $50. How about just cutting me in on the deal? I wanted to talk with him, and I was able to get access to the investors in town because I forced my way in by going to meetings where they were applying for a variance. And I'd go there and say, I think our town should encourage people to build more housing. And they never saw young people there talking about that when it wasn't their property. And I bought their notes and I bothered them. And if I could buy a property near them, I did. And I got invited into rooms, into meetings, into lunches with 50-year-olds when I was in my early 20s because I didn't wait to earn the invite. I got in the way. I talked with them. I went out of my way to get to know them. And your life is your fault. And so I had my eye on getting enough assets to be free. And it took me a decade to get there. It took me 10 years to get there.
I like that. Your life is your fault.
Yeah, when I tell that to kids, they look at me like, what? What did you say? They'd never heard that. It's so amazing.
Yeah. We had a couple questions that we put in the Facebook group from members. Alfonso, where's Alfonso? There he is back there. Alfonso wants to know what your most complex deal ever was. And if you have time to explain it.
I don't think I've ever had a complex deal.
There you go. All right, next question.
Every deal I do, I'm aware of who the people are in the deal. And I understand that the benefits that are available from any piece of property are income, which is comprised of monthly annuitized cash flow for investors, tax benefits for investors, and profit for flippers, for business people. So if you had a house that paid $100 a month in cash flow, how many of you would sell it to make 10 grand today? Wow, there's not one business person in the room. Everybody else would keep it for the $100 a month, which is precisely what I would do. But a business person doesn't. They flip to make a profit. They're the ones who pay the taxes. They're the ones who make the government feel like we're doing this right. We get to steal from these guys. And they don't even whine. So now, the income is one portion. And I know in my marketplace, there are business people who'd like to make a profit. There are investors who'd like cash flow and tax benefits. Then there are people who want to build net worth. The net worth is built through growth and is built through amortization of debt. Mm-hmm. Then there are people who want to enjoy a house. They want to reside there. They want to raise their family there. They want to enjoy the school, the yard, the things around it. The enjoyment is for people who become my tenants because I'm an investor. But each of those pieces is there in every single house. And so I structure a deal. And that deal I just talked to you about, I'm $6,000 light on the deal. Where can I get the $6,000? Think of those benefits. Andy? All right. Andy's offering the $6,000. But where would you get the $6,000? Could I sell somebody an option, giving them some of the growth to get the $6,000 to make the deal? That's true in all deals. Could I wrap the 0%? Is there anybody who'd like to get 3 or 4% on all that $90,000 simply by helping me with my cash flow or by putting up $6,000? There are, and they could get the amortization without hurting my cash flow. All those pieces are there. Your job is to match the benefits with the people and bring as many allies into the deal as you need to make the deal. In every single transaction you do, the most valuable thing you get is the ally you make. Did you see your two group members who were up here before me? Mm-hmm. With that deal? Do you think those guys might be friends in the future? Why? Because they help one another. Mm-hmm. That help will result in more benefit than that $26,000 check. And that's true all the time. And for you people who've done business with somebody and not gone back to those people and told them what you're doing and told them what you're hoping for and asked them for help and offered to help them, you're making a mistake. When I did that thing for Gary Johnston, I did a 3-day master's with him, and my topic was relationships and wealth building. And in making my notes up for that presentation, I discovered I've done 71 transactions with 4 families. Now think how much easier and more efficient that is than 71 transactions with 71 families who you got to establish a rapport with. You got to get to know, you got to make it, you got to find out why they would sell that house. It is so much easier to go back to the people you've done business with before. When I bought my 4th house, I promised the seller $10,000 and I promised the seller $400 a month. The only part of that I didn't have was the $10,000 and the $400 a month. So, how did I get what I'd promised to the seller? I borrowed $10,000 from my tenant in my 2nd house. And I rented the house I bought for more than $400 a month so I could make the payments. It was because of the tenant in my 2nd house that I was able to cope with the $10,000. And it was because of my tenants in the house I was buying, I was able to cope with the monthly payments. It's your job to put these pieces together. And that's not complex. That's about caring about other people and helping them.
And you, I'm sure a lot of people in this room already know, but he has a pretty famous tagline. A I'll let you say it.
All right, tell me which one it is. I
You
always
know,
ask
about-
them, why would you sell a nice house like this?
There we go. That's the
Because
one.
that's what I'm looking for. Information. What uncomfortable circumstance has caused them to want to sell a house? Because something's changed in their life. If they own a house, they're not looking to throw it away. Something's changed. If you can't bring yourself to say, why would you sell a nice house like this? Say, why would you sell an interesting house like this?
Yeah, that's very important because I interviewed somebody earlier for the podcast also, and he's an agent, and he was talking about it. He works with investors, but he always does it from the agent mindset of just chasing the highest price possible. And we talked about, you gotta start and ask them like, why? What's, maybe they don't want the highest price. Maybe they just want to get out of it.
Right.
You know?
I bought a house 3 years ago for $261,000. She had an offer from a builder of $350,000. So now for all the crazy numbers people, they're saying, gee, who would turn down 350 and accept 260? 261 was exactly what we paid. Mm-hmm. Why do you think she did that? I wasn't going to tear down her home. She had lived in that house. She had raised her son in that house. She had been there since 1953. The builder was going to pay her $350,000 and do what? Bulldoze it and build a new house overlooking the park, overlooking the water. I was going to do what? Rent it to a nice family who could pay for it for me. And she took $90,000 less on a $350,000 property because I listened. I cared. I heard her when she said she didn't want her house torn down. And I explained to her that I loved her house and where it was. And I would fix it up and rent it because I wanted to keep it. And she sold it to me. Those are important parts of that deal.
Yeah, that's a massive reason to sell it. What are some other examples of like people that have maybe they weren't all about the price?
I traded somebody a condo for a house. Now, who in the world would be stupid enough to take on a homeowners association and give up a house? An old
Somebody
person who
want
can't
maintenance.
do stairs in a house anymore, can't take care of the lawn anymore, is getting a condo near her church and near her friends and able to stay in the community. And I traded her the condo free and clear for her house free and clear. Now, what was the only problem I had? I didn't have a condo. So do you know there are people who have condos who want to sell them? So how did I get a condo? I offered to buy it and give the guy payments. I offered a promise for a deed. That promises are the most common currency that I use to make a deal. I promised to pay them $1,250 a month for 180 months in exchange for a condo. Everybody got that? And they said they would do that. What did I give them as security? A mortgage on my new house. Where did I get my new house? From the lady who gave it to me for the condo that I gave the note to get. And so the person who wanted to get rid of the condo got rid of the condo, so they were happy. They got an income stream, so they were happy. I got a house with payments that tenants could afford. I had to get them a condo to make it work. Instead of giving them money to get the condo, I got them the condo. And see, nobody in this world wants the money. No matter how many times they lie to themselves and lie to you, no one wants the money. If you said to somebody, I will give you, in California, $1 million for your 800 square foot house. But That's what you get. You can never spend it. You can just have it. How many people would take dirty green pieces of paper and pile them up in their house? Spare toilet paper. That's what that's good for. The only reason people take dollars is because it's a conduit out of something they want less into something they want more. That's really important. Your job is to say, why would you sell a nice house like this? So you find out where they're going.
I love that question. We literally we say it as a joke at exchangers. Somebody puts a property on the board. We're like, why would you sell such a nice house as that? And it really, gets to thinking sometimes. How do you? I mean, obviously, you talked about Evan and Beto coming up here and doing a deal together. How do you feel about wholesalers? Like, is that something you've done, or is there a place for them? Like,
I have never done any wholesale. If I'm going to work, it's going to be working for equity. But I'll tell you, I started out of high school as a real estate agent. I started as a real estate agent because I didn't have the backbone to buy a house, take all that risk, fix up and sell it. I wanted to let the person own the house. I'd sell it and get a commission, but I wouldn't take the risk of buying it. And the only time I've ever used the tool, I've done damage with it, so I couldn't fix anything. So I worked as a broker, and do you know that first year I made $4,000 in income? It was amazing. I took classes in tax avoidance. Why was I taking classes in tax avoidance? Do you know I could actually shelter the $4,000 with very little effort? So why would I take a class in tax avoidance when I'm only earning $4,000? Because when I could help someone else avoid the tax, I could earn a place in the deal. I could help them do an exchange, and I could then lease option the property that they got. I could get equity. I could get paid commissions. I could earn by helping other people. So you learn not just for application to yourself, but for application to others.
And that's, again, we talked about on the podcast. I did like three of these in the last 48 hours. And one of the topics we were talking is having multiple tools, not just having a big, I think Vina is the one that refers to wholesaling as just having a big hammer. Mm-hmm. And that you have to have multiple tools in your toolbox. Yep. To be an effective. And that's what you're talking about, that you want to, that the taxes, you can help people out with 1031s, right? Yeah.
Well, Dykes Boterford and I were on a cruise, and Dykes was talking about what kind of reserve you should have. And Dykes is one of those conservative Southerners who thinks you should have reserves. I mean, he actually thinks it should be money in reserve. Imagine wasting money by letting it sit. And I say, I want no reserves. Why don't I want reserves? Because I know other people who have reserves and I can borrow it from them. Ah. So I don't need to have reserves. I need to have friends and allies.
My mom's over there Evan's patting my mom on the back.
So like, I'm doing
my mom's the reserve one. How much equity you got in your primary, Mom?
Vina Jones Cox jumps up and Vina says, "You old guys," he said, "You're talking about borrowing money. Dykes is talking about leaving money on the sidelines. Just stay in business. If I need $20,000, I'm not going to go borrow it. I'm not going to go find it in my cookie jar. I'm going to go make a deal and earn $20,000. You've let your skills atrophy." And she's right. Because I was an agent. And I actually made a living doing that. And I can't do that anymore. Because I haven't been a business person. I've been an investor. Mm-hmm. But it was interesting to be on that cruise and see Dykes with his attitude. It's worked really great for him, me with mine, and her with hers, and how very different we were, and yet how aligned we were in saying our life is our fault and we're going to do something with it, something that'll make us proud.
Absolutely. What question I like to ask investors that have, very successful investors if you were starting over, like say, anything, whatever the worst possible scenario is that happened, if you were starting over from scratch, knowing what you know, what would be how would you rebuild it?
I'd go out and find somebody with a problem and I'd help them. And so if you're technique driven, you cost yourself deal after deal after deal. If you're trying to force everyone in this room to wear a size 8 pair of shoes, you're going to make a few deals because there's some people in the room with size 8 feet. But there's a lot of other people. So you can't be technique driven. You have to be problem driven. I was talking earlier to somebody who was asking me about what kind of problems you solve. I had someone call me and recognize I'm 76 years old. Every bit of business that I do today is repeat and referral business. So the people know me or know someone who knows me. Very different than when I was starting. So now it's all repeat and referral business. I had a lady call me. Very important. I do not call people. They call me. I then called her back, made an appointment to go to her house. Got to her house. And she said, Mr. Fortunato, it's really nice to meet you. Bill told me to call you that you could solve this problem. My sister came to visit 12 years ago. She is still here. If you will get her out of my house, anything else you need to make the deal, we will do. Well, that's not a technique in anybody's presentation at a RIA. That's not in the CCIM or the MLS handbook. That's a person with an uncomfortable circumstance. We bought a single-wide mobile home in a park that had a $650 a month lot rent. And we gave it to the people for the equity in that house. And they gave it to the sister to get rid of her. I've never done that deal again. I didn't try to force it on the next people. I listened, I cared, and I helped them. That's your job. It's not to go raise funds. It's to find out what can I do to help somebody else.
Solve problems.
My son made a great lease option deal. Nice, simple, safe lease option. Didn't take title. And it wasn't somebody that I knew or who had been referred to us. And I said to my son, how did you find that opportunity? And he said, I was driving down the street and I saw a woman in the yard kicking a realtor sign. What was that? Was that a sign of distress? Uncomfortable circumstance? And so he stopped. He talked to the woman. And what had happened? She bought a better house, a dream house. And she then sold. She had a realtor sell her lesser house that she'd moved out of. She closed on the new house. What do you think she did after she closed on the new house?
She listed the old one?
She furnished it. What did that do? Stripped her of every cent that she had in the world.
No reserves.
And the sale, no reserves. The sale of her house fell through. And she had 2 payments coming up next month, and she didn't have the available money. She had great credit. And my son lease optioned that house at a break even and got control of a nice house, a house that he ultimately sold for $325,000 with nothing but the promise to make that $1,500 a month payment on that house, starting with the payment due in 2 weeks. That happened because he stopped and talked to the people.
Everybody following? So Farrah's question that she posted in the Facebook group was to explain the use what you. I wrote it down because even I get confused. Use what you want to get what you need to get what you want.
All right.
And I feel like you've been
Everybody
kind of
does
explaining
that, right?
it.
You use what you want
Yeah.
to get what you need to get what you want. Everybody knows how to do that, right?
So use a.
Has anybody ever seen somebody buy a house and they didn't have all cash? All right. Did they pay all cash at the closing? Don't you see people buy houses all the time by finding a lender and borrowing the money to buy the house? Would the lender lend them the money if they didn't buy the house? No, but they don't have that house. They want that house. They then find someone who wants to lend money to get a yield, and they say, I'll borrow against this house that I don't own, but I want it. If you'll lend me the money, I'll be able to buy it. When I buy it, then I'll give you a mortgage on it, and you can take your thumb off the money you put on the table at the closing, and we can release it to the seller. But you use the house you want to get the money you need to get the house you want. Now that's using money. That's something everyone has seen, a buyer without the cash using the house he wants as collateral to get the money he needs. That's exactly what I did with the condo and the woman who couldn't do stairs anymore. Mm-hmm. I offered a mortgage on her house that I didn't own yet as security for the condo, which I gave to her, and she gave me the house, and then I was able to give a mortgage on the house. So you have to see those steps, but the model is the guy who has enough of a down payment and knows a lender or knows a mortgage broker or knows an IRA that will lend the money as long as he gets the property that he wants. He doesn't have to have it first.
Farrah, are you satisfied with that answer?
You
got to use a mobile home to get the sister out,
she'll ask
and then you get the
again.
house. That's
No, use what you have is what you do to get rid of stuff. See, use what you want is what you do to acquire. Use what you have to get what you want. So you get what you need to get what you want. This is the way you get rid of stuff. You got a house you don't like. Offer to trade it into a house you do like. Make it part of the deal. Become a buyer. That's a different problem than trying to acquire. When I got out of high school, I didn't have anything to trade. I borrowed my dad's car to show houses. But I could make a deal by trading promises to get the deeds to the property I needed. And that's what I did to make the deals to begin to build my estate. If I had waited until I had money to buy a house, I'd almost be ready to buy my first house today.
I like it. I like it. You want to open it up to any questions in the audience?
Yeah, of course.
Anybody?
Huh.
They're still thinking about that mobile home.
How do you structure all of the homes that you have now as far as, is it a trust? How do you protect
Everything I have is in trust because of my estate plan. And I mean, that's a great question. Something people typically don't talk about, but I use grantor trusts and a living trust. When I started out of high school, while I was in college, I bought my first house. How did I title it? It was in my name. And who was the beneficiary? Me. It was my house. Who got the rent? Me. If I died, how did it get transferred? By will, either created by me or by will created by the state. So it was in my name. And the next house was in my name. And the next house was in my name. And the next house was in my name. And then all of a sudden, I actually paid attention to my dad, who had properties in trust. I said, what's that about? And he said, well, if I pass away, the trust doesn't die. And so mom doesn't have to go through that. And the income continues. I said, oh, that sounds like a good idea. It's not so bad to learn from people who've been there ahead of you. And then I got married. Now suddenly, it's not just me, it's me and Jean. So now the property goes into trust. So I've got a contract to buy a house from you, and it's you and me. I then assign it to a trust. I sit down and type. I have my mother type the trust. Typing is not a big strength of mine. Type up the trust, and the trust says, I'm the grantor. I'm setting it up. I look for somebody who's naive enough to agree to be my trustee. So I find Rich will be my trustee. And so
Definitely naive enough.
as a grantor, I sign it, and Rich signs it as my trustee. Right, got that? The trust says the property is going to be deeded to Rich as trustee, and the beneficiaries are going to be Jean and me. And if one of us passes, the other one is going to be the contingent beneficiary. So what's happened is if something happened to me, Rich knows it goes to my wife. Everybody got that? And because the trust didn't die, the trustee didn't die, there's no need for probate on that. Now, that was wonderful, but that was 1974. You know what happened? No, in 1975, Mary came along and we had a child. And in 1976, Pete came along. And in 1977, Jay came along. And in 1979, Michael came along. So now, what's happening to that trust? All of a sudden, there's some changes need to be because your life changes. And the trusts need to be made to order for your family situation. So now, I can't make the trust say, if something happens to me and to Jean, our 4-year-old daughter and our 3-year-old son and our 2-year-old son and the 1-month-old baby will own it together. What's the problem there? They're sharp, but they're not that sharp. They're not able to manage it. So we had to create a testamentary trust where my brother and my sister, the aunt and uncle of those children, would be trustee for the kids. And so that then became the contingent beneficiary if something happened to both of us. Well, nothing happened and our kids grew up. So now our trust goes from me to Jean. If something happened to me, it's Jean's for her life. At the end of her life, it becomes the kids equally. Everybody see that? There's 4 kids. Each gets a fourth of the income from the trust, benefits from the trust. All right? Everybody understand that? Now what happens? Mary gets married. What's happening now is, if something happens, we don't want to say to Jeremy, gee, Jeremy, sorry, you're not a blood relative. Mary's share goes to her brothers, right? So you got to make adjustments because they're married. Then my granddaughter was born. Now suddenly I had to change the trust to per stirpes to say that the grandchild would get the parents' share in the event. This is not a cookie cutter thing. You have to, in my family, we now have 4 kids that we're really proud of that have their own real estate, that are all investors, and they have stuff that's theirs, but they also have stuff that's ours and goes to all of us, always respectful of their spouses and their children. And that's something you have to do for yourself. You've got to build those to suit for your family.
Andy's got a question.
90% of the people in the room have no idea what it is.
He's throwing the jargon flag.
What does per stirpes mean?
Per stirpes means the children, the next generation, get the parents' share should the parents have passed. And it's not per stripes, it's per stirpes.
Was I the only one that thought it was the grandkids' like last name or something? What's up, Andy?
I said, I just wondered who in the room knew that.
Well, nope.
You guys gotta
I'm not joking. I thought it was the last name. I'm not afraid to say when I don't know something.
But do remember see, you get people who teach a class on a trust and they can say, this is how you type it up.
Mm-hmm.
But indeed, it's so personal for you and for your family.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't see that. Yours can't be like mine. One of the things that we get, it's against the law to write a trust for somebody else. Why? Because government does what? It sells monopoly. And so it sold the attorneys a monopoly to write these kind of contracts. So people call me and say, would you do a trust for me? And I don't give a damn what the law is, but I'm not going to write a trust for them because of my sensitivity to how their family situation is. Mm-hmm. And so I say, no, I won't write a trust. But if you'd like, I'll send you a trust, or I'll give you a copy of a trust that I've used on one of my properties. So what happens? You send over a copy of the trust, and what do they do with it? They white out the 123 Main Street, and they put in, 123 Jump Street. Then they white out Peter Fortunato, and they put their name in. And then they white out Rich as trustee, and they put a new trustee in. And then they sign it, and they put it in their file. And do you know when I see that trust, who are the contingent beneficiaries in that trust? The lineal descendants of Peter Fortunato. And I say, thank you very much. You really didn't need to do that, but my kids are thrilled. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. You are responsible. Your life is your fault. You're supposed to pay attention and do it right.
Eddie.
I have a lady friend. She's in her 90s. She has an estate that's worth north of $50 million. So she's well ahead of that $11 million cutoff.
12 and a half, yeah.
The government's going to steal a whole lot of that money unless she comes up with a good plan. You've got a big family. What would your best solution be for my 90-plus-year-old lady friend?
Is she single? Good one.
I would have her buy some stuff. And those things would have some awful title flaws that would destroy the value in the estate and teach her kids how to cure those title flaws when they inherit. All right. I leave a house to my kids, and the house is waterfront, worth $1 million, easy. The lot's worth $1 million, but I've leased it to somebody for $5,000 a year for the next 99 years. Anybody here an appraiser? No? I don't blame you. I wouldn't admit it either. If a property grosses $5,000 a year for the next 99 years, would it appraise for $1 million? No. But if the lease could be canceled, might it return to $1 million? I heard about a guy who he and his wife made gifts to their children. And they said to the kids, listen, we're going to give each of you $15,000. So mom's going to give you 15. I'm going to give you 15. Mom's going to give your wife 15. I'm going to give her 15. We're going to give your brother 15. We're going to give your brother's wife 15 times 2. Now we've got $120,000 we've given you. And it's tax-free. Ever understand that? Just gifting.
Mhm.
And the kids were all in favor of that. And then the parents said, and we want you to take that $120,000 and buy a lot on the lake up in the mountains. And the kids said, well, we don't know if we want to buy a house on the lake, a lot on the lake. And the parents said, well, we don't know whether we want to give you $120,000. And so the kid said, where is this beautiful lot? And so the parents gave them the money, and the kids bought the lot on the lake. That lot, that lakefront lot, had taxes that were a couple $1,000 a year. And kids whined to the parents. They didn't want to pay that. So the parents said, we will lease the land from you, and we'll pay a rent equal to the taxes. Everybody understand that? Now the parents are tenants on that lot, right? What do you think the parents did? They built a 5-bedroom, 5-bath chalet overlooking the lake and a dock on the leased land. What do they do every summer? The whole family goes up to Grampy's lakefront place and enjoys being a family. The cousins all get together. When the lease runs out, who gets the leasehold improvements? The owner of the lot, the landlord. Who's that? Is that in their estate? No. See, scheming is fun. What do you mean, how you figure? What do you do with your life? I mean,
Obviously not that.
I was doing that thing with Vina last weekend, and I said, they said, how do you think of that? And I said, well, it's what I do. I have no life. And my wife is sitting there in the front row, and she's glaring at me. I said, I'm sorry, honey.
See, don't get mad at me when I'm working until 2 a.m. on real estate deals. So, any other questions? Ray had his hand up.
How do you do property management? Do you do it yourself? Do you outsource it?
Property management. How do you do it?
I do it with my kids. If the property is more than 12 miles away, I then sandwich lease to a young man who's not so young anymore, who's a real good manager who I've done business with, an ally. I've made deals with him before. And so if it's more than 12 miles, I lease it to Mike, who then subleases to the tenant.
Why do you sandwich?
Because if I pay him a commission, he's got to pay ordinary income tax. If he rents it from me and rents it to someone else, he only pays income tax without paying self-employment tax, because it's not business income, it's rent. And I don't want him to be my manager. I don't want him to be my agent representing me. I want him to be a principal.
Yeah. Marta?
Do you own houses or apartment buildings?
Houses, no apartments, no
Why do you
apartments.
prefer houses?
Because there's nothing in the world easier than a nice single-family house to own and to manage. Multifamily houses, multifamily properties are much more difficult than single-family houses. Has anybody here ever known somebody who lived in a multifamily apartment? All right? What do those people want?
Peace and quiet.
Services. Services. They would come up here and change the light bulb. What a bunch of crap. I said, so I'm not good at services. What do people want in houses? Privacy. I am so good at leaving them alone, it's scary. I am great at privacy.
Any other questions? I have more, so we can. Marta, go ahead.
Oh, one more. When is a property a good deal? What, after paying all the expenses, what kind of cash flow is?
None. What was the first example I gave you? My cash flow was negative every minute. My goal, however, is that to get a property where a tenant who wants the enjoyment, to enjoy that house, can make all the payments. If I can find a family to buy a house for my family, I'm in favor of that. That's why I told Luca, my grandson, I buy nice houses in nice neighborhoods that I rent to nice families who take care of the house and pay for them for me. The more people that can be encouraged to buy houses for my family, the better I like it. And that's my overall simple goal. Give people an opportunity to buy houses for my family.
Josh?
So you obviously have had a lot of houses over many years. You're about relationships with people. What's some of your process in finding good people or identifying good people to rent your homes?
Okay. I buy houses. The houses I want to keep are in neighborhoods surrounding big, active churches. Really good private schools. To a lesser extent, government schools with a good reputation. Community centers. Where I live, Bay Pines Veterans Hospital is there in St. Pete. And the Veterans Hospital attracts around it the families of the veterans who are being serviced there. And those families are really tight, just like the families around the good private schools, around the churches. And that extended family in the community helps me manage my properties. My average tenant is a decade in my house or longer. When a tenant leaves, I want to rent to somebody else in the neighborhood. And when my tenant leaves, because they're a member of the church, they go to the school, they tell the people around them, and their friends and neighbors become my next applicants. We bought a house by a really fine Christian school in 1995. We have had 3 tenants since 1995 in that house. And every one of them either taught at the school or had kids in the school. That's what I'm looking for in the really good neighborhoods.
So just highly desirable. LA?
Pete, what are some of your biggest fears in what you do? You haven't, I guess I would say that you do, but are they?
You can edit the tape, Pete.
No, my fears, because I really and truly do believe that my life is my fault. I work overtime to be proud of what I do. And because I choose what I do, I am afraid of very, very little. When I make a decision, usually I'm right. Sometimes I'm wrong. I'm not going to spend time looking over my shoulder, regretting the past. I'm going to look forward and say, I am inspired by what I can do. If I started regretting and looking backwards, that would terrify me, because that is such a giant mistake. I think being inspired by what you can do with your life is really important. And inspiring and encouraging others is the major role that you play in being a leader in your community. And falling down at that, failing to go out and talk to people about how they can make a better life. If you notice the shirts I wear all the time, I am preaching all the time when I'm outside. I am trying to encourage people to do better. To the extent that I fail at that, I would be very disappointed in myself. And that's my responsibility, to live the best life, the most impactful life I can. Yep, Evan?
Actually, I have two, but you've been investing for 50 years, and I know you talked before about inflation. That goes back to the reserve, having reserves or not having reserves, that issue. I know that there's a lot of people in this room that I've had conversations with that are sitting on, say, 5-6 figures in cash because they feel better. No, I don't mean my wife. Seriously, we have talked about this, and the reality is why those hard assets. Can you explain why having an asset like a home is far superior or not far superior to having cash in the bank and the danger of the cash in the bank?
The danger of cash. Has anybody been to a store recently where they say, no, we don't take cash?
Mm-hmm.
It's a piece of paper. It has no value. Its value is its acceptability. At some point, people say, forget that, I'm not taking paper. Or you got to give me $1 billion worth of it to make it worthwhile because I really need a fire to stay warm tonight. I am afraid of paper. I am afraid of notes that have no security, or that have security but have a fixed payment and interest rate in an inflationary time. So I want assets that provide me with inflation-hedged income. So that's why I want rents. I do not want interest. I will take a note. I'll take a note that bears interest. Why will I take it? I like the profit. I'm going to use it as a currency. And so I'll take that paper knowing it's not a great investment. It's not even a good investment, but it's okay. And someone else will take it in the future, and I can trade back into assets that are inflation hedged, which means real estate. Again, using Gene and me and our life, we moved to Florida when we were 35 years old. We had 33 houses. We had 4 children. The oldest was 7. We wanted to spend time together and with our children. We then took our 33 houses and traded them. Now, not every one of them at one time. We traded them over the next 2 years into 22 better houses and a portfolio of $300,000 in paper. That $300,000 in paper produced $100 a day in cash flow, which was principal and interest. So when we spent that $100, we spent our interest income and a piece of our principal. Everybody see that? Mm-hmm. And we allocated that to lifestyle. We said that $100 a day is what we're going to live on. That's going to enable us to travel with the children, to have them in schools, to take them on vacations, to have them in rec leagues, to have me coach basketball because I could beat a 10-year-old. So it made me feel good when I went down there and played basketball with a 10-year-old. All of those things we wanted to do. Now, over 12 years, our children went through school. And in 1995, our kids were launched. That $300,000 paper portfolio had gone down, right? Because we're spending principal and interest. And we're now down at $85,000 left on that 300. So that means in those 12 years, we spent $285,000 of our principal. And we spent all of the interest on lifestyle. But by doing that, we were able to leave our houses alone and not need to work on them terribly hard. We just let the tenants pay those houses down for us. When our kids were launched, we took the remaining $85,000 in paper, which was paying $1,400 a month at 9.5%. And we traded it for a single family house that rented for $795. Why did we trade $1,450 a month in paper for a house that rents for $795? Houses don't run out, and they're inflation hedged. Now, $1,450 a month on $85,000. What do you think that's worth today? Zero, because it amortized to nothing. What's the house worth today?
A lot.
$400,000. What's it rented for today? $2,500. And we still have it. So we used the paper. And then when we got to the point we no longer needed it, we traded back. And it's because I have the perception of being able to trade and the confidence in myself to trade that I'll hold paper while I use it as a tool and then trade back to get back to the safety of inflation-hedged properties as my mainstay for my family's assets.
Everybody got it?
All right. And by the way, there was a question earlier about what if the end of the world happened and you had to start over? How would you start over? Everybody remember that question?
Yeah.
I was at Masters last year with Gary Johnston and Clyde Wilson. Some of you guys may have known Clyde. And they asked that question, and Clyde said, if I lost everything and had to start over, I'd blow my brains out. And that wasn't the answer they were looking for.
Pete, I have a question here. And we're about out of time, so it's probably going to be the last one. But when we redid the club, a couple of years ago, and even when we got this clubhouse about a year ago, we really sat down and we put together different avatars of like different people, of beginners, starters, and and I had forgotten that you had already done that. So we were racking our brains on like putting these things together, and you had already done that with the dreamers, the builders, the starters, and the enders. Is that your thing, or did you put it together with other people, or?
I don't know that's how I perceive the journey from a starter, from a dreamer who says, I can build enough assets to make me free to pursue whatever I want to pursue. Mm-hmm. And you start with a dream, because if you don't believe that you can do it, you'll never try to do it. Mm-hmm. And then when you get past that point of dreaming and you say, I'm going to do it, you make a promise to yourself. Then you become a starter and you go out, and I made 200 offers which were not accepted. I was unable to close before I bought my first house. But 10 years after I got out of high school, I had enough rent to pay the bills. Now, there was nothing extra, but it was enough to pay the bills, which meant what? I didn't have to work. Now I had to make my portfolio better. So then I started getting better quality. I'm an estate builder now. I'm trying to get better quality, easier, safer. Many, many, many of my friends went up to 60, I'm going to say houses, but a lot of you guys say doors. Then they got 60, which was more than enough. It's too many. If freedom is what you're after. If you're trying to surpass Warren Buffett, keep going. But those 60, they then back down to 40. Just like Gene and I went from 33 to 22, better houses. Mm-hmm. And so they go from 60 to 40 to 20. And so now I'm going down into better houses, and at about 15 houses that we have. And we don't want free and clear houses, because we want leverage so we have yield, but we want cash flow. So we got 15 houses. They're not all free and clear. We don't want them free and clear. Some people do. But you need to say, this is my goal. This is where I'm going to go. Instead of trying to get there by buying one and paying it off, you want to buy more and more and more. Let the growth take you where you want to go. And then cull and exchange and trade 2 for 1, get better quality. And so 60, 40, 20, and then perhaps down as low as 10 for your finished portfolio. That mechanism will get you there. And people who've done it, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people who I know have done that, and you can too.
And you're way better at explaining. I have a slide of that. You probably see me stumble through it a couple of times. That's why I wanted him to explain it, because that's where it comes from. So when you talk about, inspiring people, you definitely inspired a lot of what's going on in the clubhouse, inspired me. Last year at Masters, you talked about, we had a different slogan. Do you guys all remember a different slogan? It's on the back of your shirts, because we haven't gotten the new ones yet. But I heard you talk at Masters last year, and you talked about, getting your people together and building your tribe. Mm-hmm. And took that to heart and I put it on the banner. So what does that mean? Can you give us the quick version or the long version, either way, of what that means and what we're trying to do here, and hopefully we're doing it.
Capitalists are the greatest people in the world, because capitalists always give better than they take. 100% of the time. When you make a deal with somebody, you give them something and they give you something in exchange for it. What do we know when that happens? They like what they got from you better than they like what they gave to you. Mm-hmm. It's never that nonsense of, they were the same value. They're not the same value. What you got is better for you, and what they got is better for them. That's what capitalists do, because they do it without coercion. Your job as a leader in the community is to help your friends and all the people around you become better off. And the wealthier the crowd you deal with, the friends you deal with are, the easier it is to help one another. And your job is to ask for help and to help others. I mentioned borrowing from my tenant to buy that second house. Why would I pay 9% to my tenant instead of paying 9% to a bank? Helping them and helping me makes much more sense than giving it to a bank, giving it to an institution. And so our job as capitalists is to insist that people live better, and they can live better if they'll just push themselves. You have to encourage them, you have to inspire them, you have to help them, but you can never force them, because coercion is wrong. That's why at all times, government is evil. Never in the history of the world has there been a situation so terrible that government couldn't make it worse. And so our job is to make things better. We are the leaders in the community. Our job is to make things better. And that's done one person at a time, one family at a time, as we continue to interfere in the lives of others by encouragement, by inspiration, and by working with them to make life better. I began as a dreamer. I was a kid in high school. I became a starter. When I got out of college, I had 20 rentals. Now, that was not 20 buildings. That was 6 buildings, 20 rentals. When I got to be 28 years old, I had enough income to break even just to pay my bills. Gina and I got married. I found out that two can live as cheaply as one was a lie. And we built it up when we were 35. We once again had enough cash flow so we could live in Florida with our family, but we wanted more free time. So we traded into the 300,000 paper portfolio and went down to only 22 houses so we could live our life. These were all purposeful things as we were estate building and managing that portfolio. And then we became enders. Now, when John Schaub and I were talking about this, Valerie Schaub was really unhappy with the term ender. She did not care for that description whatsoever. And we explained that ender does not mean you're dead. It means you ended your portfolio building. You've got enough. Mm-hmm. And she had us put the SP in front of it. She said, I'm a spender. Forget that ender stuff. But I became a spender, an ender who had enough money coming in from my assets. So really, all the things I want to do, I could do. Now realize a lot of what I want to do is read and interfere in the lives of others. And that's where I discovered I had to go over that top as an ender and come back down and estate build and be a starter with other people to help them get started. That's when, as an ender, someone who's accomplished it, you choose to pursue significance by changing the lives of other people. And that's what capitalists can do. That's what we can do for others. And that's what we should be doing, in my opinion. Thank you guys very much.